Welcome again to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting the key issues, important events, and interesting people in our region. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick. At one point in time, Gary was the business center of our region. Most corporate headquarters were located there, and if you wanted to do business in Northwest Indiana, you needed an office in Gary. Times have changed and Gary has struggled, but there is good news and things are changing. When and how are the questions. With us to explore the potential and progress in Gary, Indiana, is Chuck Hughes, the Executive Director of the Gary Chamber of Commerce. Always a pleasure to have you here, Chuck.
My pleasure. Thank you. I appreciate the invite.
Now, we were talking earlier that you're kind of used to being in this seat, not at the studio, but you've got a show every week too.
Oh, absolutely. It's a little bit strange, but it's pleasant because you have the responsibility of keeping the show rolling. All I have to do is respond as a guest. But yeah, we do a show, it's called Spotlight on Business. It's something that I instituted after I became the director of the Gary Chamber of Commerce because I thought it was an opportunity for added exposure for our membership, and it's proven to be so.
So you haven't been plotting and planning now of all the things you're going to do to mess up, are you?
I don't know, because I got some advice before I came here. You may be familiar with my wife, Dr. Danita Johnson Hughes. She looked at me in the eye and she steadfastly said, "Chuck, when you go there, don't be yourself." I don't know what that means.
Well, I want you to, Chuck, I want you to be yourself. So if you were going to give advice to me to do a good job, what would you tell me from your experience?
Just from what I've noticed already, I couldn't give you any advice because you're certainly working at a great studio. The technicians have been spot on, and I'm impressed, Keith, with what you've done so far. I just hope that this guest is worthy of your interview.
Well, I asked you to bring something on the show, and this is what you brought along, so we're going to like put this guy, I guess, up here. So why did you, who is this anyway?
Outside of my heart, my family, this is my heart, Keith. See, people look at what I've done. I'm the director of the Chamber of Commerce. I was a city councilman for 16 years. Actually did some television before. But more than anything, most of my adult life, I was a member of the Gary Fire Department. And I really have real, true, heartfelt feelings for firemen because I know what they go through.
So is this guy named Chuck, or is he supposed to look like?
No,
is he supposed to look like you? Or
you know
something?
what? I just call him my buddy. I mean, I don't want people out there watching the program to think that I'm some oversized guy that goes to bed with his teddy bear. But this is symbolic of all of those men and women. No, I don't. Okay. But I've slept in bunk rooms with firemen for many, many years, more than half of my life. And so the symbolism is real. And so this is my buddy, and he reminds me of where I come from.
Okay. So what was it like? Why did you give up firefighting?
I retired. I got old.
Okay.
See, I'm a little vain, Keith, so I don't want to say how long I was a Gary fireman, but let me put it this way. You can retire after 20 years of service, and I worked well beyond 20 years of service. So I retired. Actually, I got to the point where I received the maximum benefits for pensions and such, and so I worked as a Gary fireman for 34 years.
And
that's not a small portion of my life.
And age does play, the physical condition does play.
Well, it does, but the thing about that is as you progress up the ranks, then you do less physically. It becomes more of a leadership type of position, but it's all integral to the process because public safety, see, it reminds me of sports. I'm an ex-jock, and it's almost like having your teammates. I mean, you have officers that call plays, you have players who execute the plays, and the bottom line is to score. And the goal is to save lives and save property. And you know that's the most important game that any of us will play.
So you're kind of at the coaching stage of your life. Is that what you're trying to say?
Absolutely. When I left, because to your point, it's a very physically demanding job, and it's just like in the NFL. When a running back gets to 30 years old, they say the guy is too old because it's hard to handle the wear and the tear and the daily grind. Well, the same thing with the fire department, because if you're wearing 70, 80 pounds of gear, you have to carry ladders that weigh 10, 15 pounds. You have to rescue people who weigh even more than you may, and you have to endure smoke and heat on top of that. With your physical condition having to be on par. So yeah, it's a young man's job at that level, but then experience takes over.
And you've been out of that for quite a few years.
I've been out of there since I I segued right into the chamber job. I retired as a firefighter in 2007. Okay. It was the same time, actually, that I ran for the mayor of the city of Gary.
Okay.
And so I kind of parlayed. I knew one way or the other I was retiring from the fire department.
And you know what's really interesting is you talk about evolving in careers, and you kind of move into the, call it the coaching phase of your life. But you know, I've known you for a while, and I would also describe you as a cheerleader. You are one of the biggest cheerleaders for Gary I think I've ever met, as well as a great cheerleader for this region. You really pump it up and talk about all the good stuff and cheer on. You want to win. You want Gary to win. I mean, I've seen that in you. Where's that come from, that coaching, that
Keith,
cheerleader?
I'm part and parcel of the community. I'm a byproduct. You know, as again, I was an athlete, student athlete in Gary. Betty basketball, as you well know, Greg Popovich was one of my teammates. That's why our relationship is so strong. These days, I played football and basketball at Gary Roosevelt. And let's go back to the fire department. I worked in public safety. So I worked, you develop this empathy and this desire to help people, rescue people, save their properties. I used to fondly say that anytime I was at a forum or any kind of session with other elected officials and others, and people talked about their accomplishments and what they've done, and I would sit back and think, you know, there's probably no one else in this room that's actually saved lives individually and saved lives collectively. I don't think it gets any better than that when you start talking about who you are and what you've accomplished.
So let's talk about Gary, because you've got so much invested in there and all the ways you talk about. Is Gary on the brink of really kind of bouncing back? I mean, it's really been through some struggles. I mean, are we seeing some good things happen? I mean, I'm seeing some good things. Are you seeing some of those good things happening there?
There are some wonderful things happening. And again, understand this now. I don't have any empirical knowledge that no one else has, but I firmly believe that there's no question Gary's going to come back. And my philosophy is that Gary's going to come back because now we realize, all of us, that is integral to the success of all of Northwest Indiana, that Gary is successful. Unfortunately, when this national economy hit us all, and it didn't just hit Gary. I mean, Gary was already hit, and Gary has taken those body blows before. But when I saw that people were talking about laying off policemen and firemen in Winfield and Crown Point, and everybody was worried about Merrillville, places like that, and everybody's concerned, rightfully so, about public safety, getting potholes fixed, these kinds of things. So it wasn't just Gary. But when you look introspectively at some of the things that you are well aware of and others are, the lifeblood for everybody in Northwest Indiana, much of it resides or runs through Gary.
You know, and that's really an interesting comment you make, because I agree. It seems like this region as a whole has figured this out, at least the leadership, and a lot of people, you know, there's a lot of naysayers and people out there who still make remarks, but you're right. It seems like a critical mass of people go, we've got to help Gary, and we've got to see that progress. You know, there's this concept of tipping point, you know. Are we getting close to that point where, you know, all of a sudden we're going to really start seeing some serious positive things? Because I think we've seen them incrementally, slowly over the years. You think there's a point where all of a sudden it's going to take off?
Yeah, I think that the process is in place right now. Because again, as I alluded to earlier about the fact that everybody now realizes in their best interest that Gary is successful. The other part of that, Keith, is you watch and see the activity that's taking place around the airport. If you ride around the lakefront, you see you're in phase 2, I believe, of development at Marquette. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going on. I'm not as familiar as I need to be, as I'm going to be, but I think we've all read with interest and heard when the mayor suggested that Gary was selected as one of these cities that the White House is going to provide resources, take a look at. And so I think now we are at that point where it's time for us to move forward. And hopefully we're going to move forward collectively and not just residents of Gary.
If, you know, when I had Mayor Karen Freeman Wilson on here really a couple of years ago, I think I asked her this question I'm going to ask you. If I could grant you one wish, you know, that you could do one strategic thing to really have an impact on Gary, what one thing would you do to just really make a difference?
Depends, because if you want something that's tangible, I can think of something tangible. If you want me to give, and I'll give you something that I think that may not be tangible.
Make it tangible or intangible?
But may be important than any of it, Keith.
Okay.
And that is the fact that people customarily talk about Gary. I mean, Gary, poor Gary.
Right.
And as I said before, that conversation is changing a bit because now folks are concerned, rightfully so, about their own situation, their own circumstance, their own communities, and they should be. I think the most important thing, if I could make anything happen, I would like to see the leadership, and I'm not just talking about the elected leadership, I'm talking about leadership in Northwest Indiana, really and truly believing that we're only as good as the rest of us. And if collectively, not just Gary, not having a pity party for Gary or a charitable event and everybody around helps Gary, but what I'm saying is if we legitimately, from a leadership standpoint, actually wanted to improve the region, inclusive of Gary being a hub, being strategically located. Lake Michigan is not going to move from Gary to South County, we know that. And so the airport's not going anywhere. No one else has that kind of developable land available. And so if we focus on not those things being located in Gary, and we're going to help Gary, but focus on the fact that if we improve those things, it's going to help the entire region. Because I tell people, and I'm a chamber exec, and one of the and a former city official, and I'm very interested in Gary people having businesses and contracts and being employed and all of those things. But let's face it, Keith, when the airport takes off, when lakefront expansion takes place, when all of the development takes place in Gary, there are region people who are going to benefit well beyond the locals.
Oh, I agree. Well, you know, that's such an interesting, and I agree with your analysis, because it's kind of like, since you're a sports guy, and you know, it's kind of like having that team that you want to win, and you know, part of you looks at that team and goes, you know, I think we can, I want us to win, but there's a point where you look and you go, I really think we actually could win the season. I think we could really take the championship. And I think you're right. If people really believe that Gary truly believed, really believed it, we could see that change. What do we need to do? Now I'm going to take the magic away. What do we need to get to help people really believe that leadership group? How do we get them to really believe it?
Well, you know, contrary to what Danita said, don't come here and be myself, I don't know anything other than to be myself, Keith, because I'm not invited to speak often at events, and I'm not, even no matter what my credentials are, whatever, I'm not often asked to be a part of these leadership operations or whatever, and I understand that.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because what it's going to take, Keith, is not just me, and being conceived or perceived rather as someone who's just loose cannon or will speak out. I think others who believe similarly will have to speak up. I think as long as there's a comfort level that you know, I'm saying all the right things, but we're not doing the right things collectively, it's not going to get better. And you know, it's a wasted resource because it's not going to take a lot from anybody. It's not going to minimize the advancement of one community over the other. It's going to really benefit this region, and this region is going to flourish. And as I pointed out, I hope that Gary residents, that we can get some people employed and get them educated and part of the workforce, but the whole region is going to benefit, and it just befuddles me that we don't see that. But I think there are not enough voices who are expressing that, because there is a matter of courtesy or whatever. I mean, after this program, I may not get invited to another event, because it's just being candid, because I am passionate in that I could come here.
But what do you think you're saying that people don't want to hear right now?
I think it's difficult for people actually to collaborate. You would think from a level of leadership, intelligence, people used to working with people, it's just hard when you say we're going to get together. Gary is going to be inclusive in much of what we do, be it the city administration, be it the Gary Chamber.
But I think everything you're saying makes sense to me. You know, I think one of the things that we miss is people who are very passionate about things. Sometimes maybe that you don't get invited because that passion is always there. People go, okay, I want to hear it again. But the reality is, you don't want to go to things where you're the only one who's passionate. You really need to see that the people on the other side of the table are becoming as passionate as you are. And as long as you're that passionate, I can't become as passionate because you're carrying the lead. It's just kind of an interesting. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think what my passion is the fact that, like you, like we've just talked about, it's so apparent that if we all just lend a little effort in a collective, cohesive manner, that it'll be an abundance and embarrassment of riches for this community, and it don't take that. And the resources are here. The human resources are here. The territorial resources are here. There's some great minds here in Northwest Indiana, great thinkers. There's entities that could come together and just do little things together, but collectively make such a statement. And I guess I wouldn't be as passionate if I saw that there was a trend for those things to be happening. Then I would sit back and watch as the progress is taking place, and those who are better equipped to do those things and to fit into those categories, to make it work. I mean, support them wherever I could and admire it. So I'm a little compassionate because how much time do we have?
Well, I don't think you should give up your passion, so hang on to your passion. Let me move to a real practical side of this. What do you say to the business who wants to move to Gary, but they look around and they go, okay, if I move to Gary, it looks like, man, I'm going to have to spend a lot of security system here. You know, I might get broken into. I'm concerned about that. And I look around here and some of the neighborhoods and I'm going, man, there's a lot of trash around here. The streets don't look that good. I don't know if I want the image of what I see to be part of the business I plant here. How do you respond to that?
Well, I can't tell them that they're lying. That's for sure. I think, you know, to answer your earlier question, and I think I did in terms of what it would take collectively and all of that, but there's certainly a great deal of homework that needs to be done in Gary. I mean, you know, it helps him who helps himself. And so when people approach me and talk about coming into Gary, what I tell them is, because most people who do that, and I do get inquiries, I get people, and people are coming. I mean, I'm not a speculator, but those who are, they know that things are going to change and turn around. People get ahead of the curve. They know that this airport is going to develop to some extent. They know that that lakefront is the same lakefront that people enjoy in Chicago and Cleveland, Ohio. Same sand, same water, I tell people. And so people are going to come anyway. And what I tell them from a chamber perspective is, if you come in, I will use my organization, my experience as an elected official, working with the business community to suggest that, because the biggest argument I used to hear in years past was, well, you know, we really like to come in here, Gary, want to help them. Man, you got to go talk to this person, you can't do this, you can't, and probably all was true. And I tell people now that I'm the executive director of the Gary Chamber of Commerce, you want to come into Gary, and if you have a viable business, I can assure you, you can go through this process. Now, we can't have you circumvent any rules. I can't pull any strings. But if you have a viable business you want to go through, because I've had that discussion with the mayor. We work extremely well together. The chamber and the city of Gary is working well together because we both reached out to make sure that that relationship was solid, because if we did that, then we felt that the civil city and the business members of the chamber would all work together. And so I'm proud of the fact we have that relationship. So those are kind of guarantees that we can give to folks. We have committees on our chamber. We have the public policy committee, education committees and whatever. And we strive, and we're going to step those efforts up to deal with issues that affect business, like education, public safety, and those things.
Tell me a couple of recent successes where you feel like somebody did go along with that and say, we're going to come here, and you fought for them and got them in there.
Yeah, we brought ProNet Energy in here. That was a company that was operating out of Chicago. They were doing some work with ArcelorMittal Steel. They called our office and suggested what was the prospects to come in together. I said, great, come on in. We did a big ribbon cutting press release for them. They were like a
how big a business?
What was it? $50 million business or something. They put offices out there in Miller. And they were part of, I guess, a minority set-aside group that had lucrative business, and they were working through and with ArcelorMittal Steel. And
have you had a couple of good examples of somebody who come in with 5 employees or a small business?
Oh, absolutely. Restaurants, businesses, absolutely. Yeah. See, contrary to what folks think, there are people who come into Gary and quietly do business. And is it what we want it to be? Absolutely not.
Why don't they get as much recognition?
They do with us,
Okay.
but they don't get the recognition because, to your point, it's 5 employees, it's 4 employees. They're on our chamber television show. We do ribbon cuttings for them if they choose to have them. We acknowledge them at our monthly luncheons. I don't want to be bodacious or braggadocio, but you know our monthly luncheons are the greatest in the area because we've been fortunate. We bring in some of the top guests from all over, nationally, locally. And so we give exposure to our business members where we can. To your point, maybe there needs to be more of an emphasis on other media outlets, newspapers, or whatever. You know, we're part of the chamber. I mean, the Times initiative with the businesses. We're spotlighted as other businesses are, but you know, I don't know, except business-minded people, how many people read the fine print and see these businesses listed. But to your point, we do what we can. To try. And so hopefully that influence and being on a program like this and being able to share a perspective that maybe a lot of people haven't heard from me before, but I believe it wholeheartedly. But I really think that if it's the spark that ignites some thinking in Northwest Indiana from a truly collaborative perspective, and no disrespect to one region or anybody else, but a truly perspective where we're truly one in what we're trying to accomplish for the entire region, and still being autonomous enough to have the pride in our communities and our chambers and such. And I think you can do both.
Well, I think you're doing a good job, and we're at the end of the show, and I just want to say to you that I watch you out in the community, and you know I study leadership and everything, and I think you've got a lot of respect from a lot of people in this community, and your leadership is really making a difference and making a difference out in and outside the city. So thanks for the leadership, and thanks for being here with us on the show.
Keith,
really
that's very kind of you to say that. And can you kind of send a copy of this tape to Danita?
I will.
And tell her I behaved.
Make sure she watches it, okay?
Thank you, Keith.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
There are 2 strong perspectives on Gary, Indiana, and they are polar opposites. You may hear, Gary has fallen apart, crime is rampant, nothing good happens there, it's a total loss, what a waste. On the other hand, some will say Gary has great potential, it is the hub of Northwest Indiana. There is such opportunity, open land, infrastructure, major highways, and railways. I choose to adhere to the second view, and let me tell you why. Most regions of this country are anchored by a major city. Our region is recognized with Gary at our core because of its historical significance, location, past glory, and size. One might say most of those are gone, yet we are still identified by that most recognized name, Gary. Like the kid who gets labeled as a problem, he remains a problem until someone or some group focuses on that kid in a positive way. Let's stop thinking badly of Gary, pointing out all of the flaws and failure. We must emphasize the good, the strengths, and the attributes. We can start with the people. I've spent quite a bit of time in Gary and was employed at IUN for 8 years. I can say without reservation, I have met the most wonderful, caring, dedicated people one could ever meet living and working in Gary. Gary has a significant airport, transportation network, a lakeshore, major industry, space for growth, beautiful old homes, cultural programs, a strong faith community. I could go on. We Americans have always rooted for the underdog, cheered for those who have overcome great obstacles, applauded the rags to riches story. Gary is our opportunity for this turnaround story. The change effort must derive from that community, but we can be the supporter, the partner, the champion, the ones who believe that it can be done. We must talk about Gary in positive ways and believe in the possibilities. We have to expect greatness. Gary is at our core, part of this region's foundation. We must see it succeed, for as Gary goes, so goes the region. Thanks for watching our show. For your friends who missed the show, you can watch it from our website. Click on the television tab, scroll down to Lakeshore Focus, and select one of our past shows that you or your family didn't get to watch. And you know, your thoughts are always welcome. Our website and email address are listed on your screen. Join us next week for another Lakeshore Focus. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick saying make a positive difference in our world today.